Okay, in this lesson, what we're going to be looking at really quickly is the main differences that I've noticed so far between Photoshop and a web app called Pixlr, which you can get free online, and it's just an online web tool. If you're in a computers class, there probably in one of your assignments is a document that says something like, for Photoshop shortcuts and selection tool help, click here. If you click on that, what you're going to see is basically some keyboard shortcuts as well as some tools here. What you need to know about Pixlr, if you're using Pixlr instead of Photoshop, is that basically everything is identical, with a few changes that I'll mention in a little bit. So that's the reason I'm talking about the differences, because what you can do is, if you're in Pixlr and you're wondering how to use certain tools, is you can still go to tutorial videos like these ones here about downloading high-res images, using the lasso tools, the magic wand, etc. Even though these are based in Photoshop, you're going to be able to translate those skills into Pixlr. So we're going to look at some of the essential differences. First of all, Pixlr is just pixlr.com, and if you'd like it to be quite similar to Photoshop, I would suggest using the advanced Pixlr E, and you may want to create an account or log in. As long as it's free, you'll be safe. I did find that if I use the same computer over and over, and I haven't cleared out my cache or anything, that it does remember my previous projects, but just be warned that you may want to actually create an account so that it's usable between different computers. So here's the interface of Pixlr right here, and here's the interface of Photoshop. So the first thing I notice is that they look quite similar. Okay, so the tools in Photoshop are on the left, and Pixlr, it's the exact same thing. They're off to the left-hand side. You've got the layers off to the right-hand side. If you want to open up new tabs, you can do that by clicking File, Open. And it has a lot of the same tools. Now, before we get into the similarities, let's talk about the three differences that I've noticed. First of all, I've noticed that there's no quick select tool for selections. So we do have the lasso tools. So if you click on the lasso tool, we've got them all here, the freehand, the polygonal, and the magnetic, very similar to Photoshop. And we also have the magic wand tool, but what we don't have is the quick select tool. So that is one thing that's lacking in it. The second thing that I've noticed that's different between Photoshop and Pixlr is that Pixlr just isn't as precise. So for example, if I want to use the magic wand in Pixlr, what I noticed is when I click on an area, it does a large variety of those colors, and that's the magic wand tool, which obviously you wouldn't use here, but it's just less precise in its color picking as Photoshop would be. So you can see it's just a smaller area in Photoshop, and it's more precise in Photoshop. You're going to find the same thing with the lasso tools and a variety of things. You have to be a little bit more patient and a little bit more careful, okay? And finally, the very, very last difference that I've noticed is when you want to subtract from a selection. It's just a different key on your keyboard. So what we learned in Photoshop is when you've got a selection, so let me just do a really quick selection here that's not very good. Okay. We learned in Photoshop that if we want to add to the selection, you hold down Shift. Okay. And in fact, what I'm talking about is the difference between subtracting from a selection. So if you'd like to subtract from a selection, so let's say I wanted to subtract, oh, it just disappeared. Let's say I wanted to subtract this green area right here. In Photoshop, you would hold the key Alt. In Pixlr, you hold the key Control. Okay, so if you want to subtract an area, you just I'm holding Control on my keyboard right now, and then just drawing a loop. You'll also notice that there are some modes up here that are add to selection, subtract from selection, but that's the keyboard shortcut. So those are the three main differences that you're going to find between Photoshop and Pixlr. So if you want to view any of those Photoshop tutorials, like I told you, you can find them on the website, on the current assignment that you're on, hopefully, and just view those and realize they're very, very similar to the web-based Pixlr tool.